So hi everybody, good morning. I'm Charlotte. I'm a senior at Boston College, and I just finished up my last week as a TA here at Perkins before graduation in the deaf-blind program, hence why the presentation will be looking at cochlear implants. So this was research that I did as part of an undergraduate practicum at Boston Children's Hospital in their Deaf and Hard of Hearing Center. So the three doctors listed are all neuropsychologists at the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Center. And so they helped me with this presentation, and we presented it last summer at the Folkman Conference at Boston Children's Hospital, which was virtual. So this is my first time presenting it in front of real people, which is really nice. So first, I just want to give some background information on the terminology and everything that I'll be using. So deaf with a capital D refers to a particular group of people who share a language and a culture, versus lowercase d deaf refers to the audiological condition of not hearing. Deaf identity is something that's really meaningful and personal to each individual, so I want to acknowledge the vast identities within deaf communities. For the purpose of this presentation, deaf is referring to the audiological condition of hearing loss. So here's just some background statistics and facts on deafness within school-age children. Researchers estimate that reduced hearing affects nearly 1 of every 5 children by the age of 18. Deaf and hard of hearing youth, or DHH, which you'll see the acronym throughout these slides, with weaker language skills are at greater psychosocial risk than those with stronger language skills. Cochlear implants, or CIs, as you'll see abbreviated, help some deaf and hard of hearing youth access and develop spoken language. And third, there's limited research on social functioning in children with cochlear implants, including how language skills relate to social skills and success with their peers. And a visual description of this slide depicts a basic linear drawing showing the side view of an ear with a cochlear implant attached. The photo shows the external components of the cochlear implant, including the speech processor and the magnetic transmitter. According to Cochlear America, cochlear implants are designed to mimic the function of a healthy inner ear, also known as the cochlea. They replace the function of damaged sensory cells inside the inner ear and help provide a clearer sound than what hearing aids can provide. So some goals and aims of this study were as follows. First, to explore the state of the literature on social outcomes for children and youth with cochlear implants. 2, to review the data that helps us understand associations between language skills and peer relationships. And 3, identify relevant gaps in current knowledge and next steps for research in this area. My personal goals behind conducting this literature review were to continue expanding the knowledge base around children who are deaf and hard of hearing. Furthermore, I wanted to seek out important conclusions that could assist me in my own work with students who are deaf-blind. As a TA, former TA here at Perkins, I worked in a classroom with 4 students who all either actively use a cochlear implant or have used a cochlear implant at some point. This research has allowed me to incorporate evidence-based practices in my day-to-day work. As I begin a career in school psychology, I hope to continue similar research in order to implement change on a scale beyond the classroom. This research is not meant to determine which language path is best for children with cochlear implants, whether spoken, sign, or both, but rather to address the disparities in our current knowledge base regarding the social development of children with cochlear implants, particularly how it's mediated by their access to language. So as previously mentioned, the style of this study was that of a literature review. So upon initial research, I found 68 papers that included some aspects of relevance to the overall topic. Ultimately, the papers that were chosen needed to have 3 core components. They all must mention first, peer relationships, 2, cochlear implant outcomes, and 3, language. Furthermore, they must all have sampled participants of school age, so ages 3 to 18. This slide includes a Venn diagram in which each of those 3 components are included with the overlap of all 3 noted as n equals 21, which is the total number of articles that fit all 3 criteria. On the top left corner of this slide, there's a text featuring the average journal impact factor. A journal impact factor is a number used to gauge the frequency with which the average article in a journal has been cited over a particular year. For the 21 final selected papers, the average factor number was 1.837. This number is relatively low, which further indicates the lack of exposure and major gaps in research being done regarding deaf and hard of hearing, deaf-blind, and other related communities. So looking at the methods within the study themselves, the majority of the papers measured look to measure children's skills by using assessment tools that measure development, behavior, social skills, and other self-reported variables. The most common were as followed: the Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test, or the PPVT, the Child Development Inventory, the Sky High Language Development Scale, the Strengths and Difficulties Questionnaire, and the Behavior Assessment System for Children, the BASC. There's also a child behavior checklist, which took a few different forms in each of the studies. I also averaged several commonalities between each of the studies. So first, the average age of implantation across the studies was 3.41 years, with a range of 1.2 to 7.2. This fits with the trend that CIs are being implanted earlier as modern technology advances. Second, the average age at the time of study was 9.26 years, with a range of 1 to 21.9. And lastly, I looked at the average types of respondents, as we found later that it may mediate some of the data. 9 studies included data reported from the child only, 9 from both parent and child, and 1 from the teacher, parent, and child. So because this was a literature review, the results are less concrete as to be expected of a traditional research study. Furthermore, the studies surrounding this topic are few and far between, and we don't have nearly the amount of data that we need to form a clear and concise picture on the social development of these kids. However, here's what we deduced. So first, when looking at the assessment used, parent reports of peer relationships were not always consistent with child and teacher reports. While this can be a result of several factors, it makes it difficult to make clear judgments on the actual functioning of the child, and it highlights the importance of integrating information from multiple sources and perspectives. So second, throughout all the studies, there's evidence to show that stronger spoken language skills in deaf and hard of hearing youth with cochlear implants corresponded to the quality and the quantity of relationships among their hearing peers. Students who had clear verbal communication with their hearing peers were better able to engage in social aspects of the classroom. This is a testament to the inaccessible environment of the classrooms, not the students themselves. And I want to clarify here that these students were being assessed in settings where spoken English was the primary, if not the only, form of communication. So therefore, the cochlear implants granted them access to spoken language, where no other forms of language were presumably available. Our last conclusion was that access to language in any form is a critical factor in development and is not inherently accessible for deaf and hard of hearing children. Language warrants communication, and communication builds relationships. So for these studies, those are the building blocks for a successful social and academic future. To conclude, we want to include some general takeaways and directions for future research. So first, deaf and hard of hearing and deafblind youth with cochlear implants are a heterogeneous group. Individual differences in language and social outcomes are very wide-ranging, necessitating an interdisciplinary approach and a whole child approach to practice and research. Cochlear implant outcome research is increasingly focused on patient-reported variables as opposed to traditional hearing and speech performance variables. So both of these points necessitate a child-focused lens when conducting future research. As mentioned, it's a very heterogeneous group where interventions and assumptions cannot be one size fits all. Context is critical when interpreting and evaluating these results. In order to have a clear synthesis of the data, it is important for us as researchers to have more uniform measurement tools. This mix of respondent, reporter, and assessment format among these studies made it difficult to analyze in a traditional statistical style. While this study touches on language access, it is important to note that there's an extremely diverse array of language modalities in this community, whether that be ASL, tactile symbols, PECs, or otherwise. It's rather about access to language itself and not the language modality. Lastly, a direction of research most relevant to the work here at Perkins is to address these topics in communities of students with extensive support needs and multiple disabilities. So example here at Perkins in the deaf-blind program, students with etiologies such as Charge syndrome and Usher syndrome have unique needs and unique characteristics, which can mediate all of the factors included in this study. So that's all I have for today. Thank you, everyone. I'm so happy to have spent the last 9 months at Perkins, and thank you for listening. Here are those references if anyone's interested. Thank you.
Okay, good morning. Switching gears a little bit from what Charlotte was talking about, we're going to talk about positioning and play. As you know, you chose to come in the theme of today, in the true spirit. We're going to talk a lot about engaging your child while you play. Great. So we are the physical therapists here in the deaf-blind program. We work with kids who are 3 years old all the way up until 22. Based on whatever their needs are, we see it all, and we love to play. So what we're going to talk about today, we are hoping that we can help you understand gross motor development all the way from being prone on your tummy to standing up and getting ready to be walking. We're hoping to help appreciate how different positions can give you different benefits and how it all contributes together to healthy growth. We're going to talk about how to tell when a position needs to be modified, when you need to do something a little bit different for your child, and kind of what that will mean and look like. We'll talk about setting up the environment in different ways to facilitate that, and kind of go through a list of exploration station resources out in the hallways. As you saw when you were coming in, we've got a lot of fun stuff out there. And our main goal is just to keep it stress-free and fun, and encourage you to take that home with you when you're out of here.
All right, so this slide is a grand overview of gross motor development. A couple things you're going to notice about this. There are no ages on this graph. You might hear age-based milestones referred to by providers when they're justifying the need for services or tracking progress, things like that. But for purposes of today, we're really just focused on the sequence. Another thing you're going to notice is that all of these things are happening at the same time. So development is not linear. Your child is going to be gaining skills in supine, which is on their backs, prone on their stomachs, sitting and standing, all at the same time. So when we're focused on positioning, we're not just thinking about one of these things at a time. Basically, just having a general overview, understanding the sequence of development is going to be really helpful for everything we're going to talk about in the rest of this presentation when you're anticipating your child's needs. So why is this important? Like I said, if you have an understanding of the sequence and you know where your child is currently at, you can predict where they're going to be going next, and that'll help you set up your environment to encourage some of those skills that your child is going to be developing next. Another thing that we want to look out for is splinter skills. Basically, what a splinter skill is an advanced skill that doesn't necessarily have a foundational basis. So an example of this that I can give is a student that I used to work with had a lot of mobility and not necessarily a lot of stability. So she was standing, she was walking with support and could walk very long distances. Her family was very focused on helping her walk. But when asked to do an activity that involved standing still, she wasn't able to do it. She didn't have that muscular stability to be able to stand still and maintain her position. So although she was already walking in that standing part of the chart, we were still focused on standing and doing a lot of static standing activities. So instead of kind of looking at that as a step back, it was more about trying to build on those foundational skills to give her that basis of stability for all the other things moving forward. So really the grand overview is that movement leads to more independent exploration. So that's what we want our children to be able to participate in, is to get out in the world and explore their environments. There's a lot of research that shows that movement is linked to a lot of different areas. So it makes sense when you think about it. When a child is able to move, explore their environment, there's a lot of incidental learning that happens when they are in a more upright position. There's a lot more opportunities for interaction with peers, interaction with family, social engagement, and with all of these things, communication is going to develop, because when a child has those opportunities for interaction and for learning, it's going to really put them in a great position to develop language and develop communication.
So on this infogram, you'll see a bunch of different areas of development: communication, cognition, fine motor skills. And this is just to show that they're all an interlocking web. One impacts another, and one is impacted by everything else around it. So like Emily was saying, it's not linear. These things kind of happen as we go through the progression of development, not just in gross motor, but also in all of these other areas. So when we're looking at the whole child, it's important to note that as we're working on physical skills or gross motor development, we're also impacting sensory access and language and cognition. So, but also that those areas are affecting the gross motor skills. So sensory access, fine motor skills are also affecting that gross motor ability. And so we're working on everything at one time, even if you're just working on standing or sitting. All of those other areas are also impacted.
So while there's that whole giant puzzle that's going on, there's also a whole slew of other medical considerations that you need to consider, especially with the kids that we work with and the kids that we see that have certain specific diagnoses. There's sometimes more things to consider than others. So just some things that we'll talk about as we go along today, and some ways that, some reasons that you might need to modify for your specific child. Would be anything going on with their cardiopulmonary system, if it's difficult for them to breathe when they're fully standing up, but it's easier when they're laying down. If they have any kind of reflux or a feeding tube, that will impact how we do some of the positioning, especially on your stomach. And then if there's any worry about aspiration or lung issues, choking when you're in different positions, that kind of thing. We'll talk about how positioning accordingly to be mindful of the airway. You always want to think about how their hips are developing. If there's someone who's a late stander, then they're going to get a little bit different development in the hips than somebody who might be typically developing. So we'll talk about ways to incorporate that into how you're positioning your child and how you're playing with them. And then any bracing needs they might have, if they have really floppy feet and they need a brace to help keep their feet stable so that the rest of their body can do something, or a back brace, something like that. And then we also have many friends that have very low tone and they need a lot of support, or they have high tone, and we can kind of learn to use that to our advantage to help them benefit more from certain positions. And then there's also a whole slew of environmental considerations that we also have to think about. If it's somebody who's medically complex and they've been in the hospital for a really long time, they're missing a lot of those environmental opportunities that were touched on, of being social and just moving around and exploring, especially if they're connected to all these lines and tubes and they can't even start learning how to roll until they're a few months old. And then also thinking about, of course, their visual access to their environment. If it's totally crazy, we don't know what they're getting out of it, and that might discourage them to move, or they might have great access and that might really encourage them. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And then also, what do you have at home? That's going to be a really big factor that we'll talk about how to modify a little bit.
So the goal, again, today, like Kat was saying in the beginning, is to have fun. We want to make this fun. Look at all those smiles here. We want the focus to be about enjoyment, about fun, because that helps foster your child to discover independently, to independently move in order to find that world around them, and not just find it, but also discover how they can impact that world around them. And we also want it to be extra fun for children with multiple different needs, because it's harder for them. So that effort that they have to put in is more than their same age peers. And so we really need for them to get the best bang for their buck. They've really got to put in the effort to get more back. So making it extra fun and motivating is really important here. Also, as parents of children with complex needs, we want to acknowledge that challenge and that demand that you have. And so this isn't just about your child having fun, it's also about you having fun and enjoying your time that you get to spend working on these different activities, and just developing a really positive bonding experience while you're working on these different motor skills. So it's fun all around for the child and for you, because that energy becomes contagious. And so it just really will be a nice, well-rounded, fun activity.
I'm going to be talking about how you want to, like the kind of the principles that you want to think about when you're considering what activities to do and how to set things up. I am just going to make a plug to start with. Some of these concepts will sound pretty intuitive if you think about it, but this particular combination of concepts is highly research-based, and it's a methodology called active learning. It's the work of Dr. Lily Nielsen. She designed this methodology for children to learn with visual impairment or deaf blindness, but it's been shown to be effective in a lot of other populations that have significant disability. It's based on psychology. It's based on how we as human beings learn. It considers the whole child. So in the puzzle slide, just that there's the social piece, emotional, cognitive, motor, sensory development, all of it, and we all need to be working together to be thinking about all of those things. So we're not here today, even though I can't say enough good things about active learning, to teach you about active learning, but I just want to be clear that we're referencing a lot of those ideas in our slides. An excellent resource, if you're interested in learning more about it, is the activelearningspace.org. It's a collaborative website that's run by Perkins, Penricton Center for Blind Children, and Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. So if you want to find out more about active learning, head there. It's an incredible resource. Take it for you. I have an image on the slide of just a game play. And so this is the playbook. So we want to make sure that we're just coming with this with a really just mindful approach of how we're setting things up. We want it to be fun. We want it to be low stress. So we just have a couple of things just to keep in mind as you're planning for this. So you really want to meet your child where they're at. You want to get on their level. You want to be predictable. You don't want them to be so confused about what's going to happen next that they can't actually settle in and enjoy and play. You want to make sure that you're starting based on what their interests are and what activities that they like, and then taking that and then being able to expand from there. We want to create opportunities for independent movement. So this is really, like Alysha was saying, a lot of our kids, especially with the dual sensory impairment of deaf blindness, they might not realize that there's a world out there that they can have an impact on. So we want to teach them that, and we do that by letting them find it themselves in a way that's adapted to what their needs are for independence, rather than us moving them as much as possible. We want to give them the opportunity and the timing that they need. So a lot of the kids that we work with in the deafblind program at Perkins might have latency, where it takes them a little bit to settle into an activity and be able to process the information in front of them. And also when they're in the middle of an activity, we have to work on not talking to them the whole time and doing a running commentary, because it would be like if you were trying to do a math problem and someone was standing over your shoulder being like, oh, did you carry the one? Oh, that's great. Giving them that time in the moment, and then finding the places where you can name things and add in the language and acknowledge all the wonderful things that they did. Repetition in this population is really important because they don't have the same access because of their visual impairment or because of their deaf blindness. So we want to make sure that also all the things that Kat mentioned, with developmental delays, there's a possible medical complexity. COVID happened, and that was really limiting opportunities to get out into the world and explore it. So that we're just giving them all of that repetition to explore so that they have the opportunity to truly learn what they're experiencing. We want to turn it into a party. I think any Perkins staff would say that they can hear me coming in the hallway. I'm a terrible singer, but if you like hearing singing, I will sing Mickey Mouse down the hallway as we're going up the stairs. And
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. So yeah, just get everyone involved. Like it was said in the keynote speech, get siblings involved, family members, friends, as many people as you can make a part of it to make it motivating and engaging and giving those social opportunities and communication opportunities. That's great. And then something that Patty Obergert, who is Lily Nielsen from Active Learning's protege, always says, we tend to get bored before they do. So just because you think, oh, we've been doing this for a while, maybe you're over it, maybe I feel like I've got to add something in and spice it up, If they look happy and content and engaged, then let them keep going with that. Okay. So then really the basics are that we want to be picking an appropriate activity. So we want it to be challenging but not discouraging. We want to, and this is part of what our exploration stations will do, is allow you to try and find what the compatible positioning supports are, because if you're trying to hold something up to someone's head so that every time they lift their head it rings a bell, your arm is going to fall off and you're going to be physically tired before they can do it. So that's why we have so many positioning supports that we use to really just get things where they need to be without having our own body parts exhausted. And then we want to make sure that we're picking something that's really motivating and engaging and preferred. So you'll probably get it wrong sometimes. I definitely do, but it's really about just in the moment being like, how did that go? It didn't go so high. Okay, what can we do next time? Because we're learning about the children the same way that they're learning about their own likes and preferences. And so sometimes they love it one day and they don't the next day. And we just keep trying to find something that works. In terms of when we're picking the materials, we want to think about what kind of access do they have from a sensory perspective. Vision, hearing, touch, is that an asset for them? Is that an area where they're limited? Do they need a visual break because they just did a lot of reading activities and so now they need something that they can really just explore with their hands instead? In terms of their physical access, what kind of movements do they have? Where are they holding their body? Are they very close in? Are they fisted? If you put it on their body or at their body, will they be able to explore it? Or will that mean that they aren't interested in going any further because everything they want is right there? So just really thinking about the location. And also, of course, safety. So if your child is an oral explorer, we love that. You get so much information about the world through your mouth. We just want to make sure that the materials that we're giving you are safe to be mouthing. If you're someone who's biting down, we can't give you small beads or bells or things like that that you might put in your mouth and crunch down on. And then, other things like Kat mentioned, medical concerns. So, if your child has a seizure risk, that can be triggered by flashing lights, then you just want to be thoughtful about what you're picking and making sure that you're not having any of that strobing effect. So the moral of the story is you know your kids best. You know what toys they like. And sometimes it means just sitting down and lining up the toys that you're like, I know they like these things. And then being like, is there a common theme so that I can kind of be thoughtful about the approach. So on the Active Learning website, there is a materials and activities planning sheet that you can always use to kind of think that out. And I think it's really great to bring to the rest of the providers, to bring to the rest of the team. Like was mentioned in the keynote, getting everyone involved, all the collaborators, because we see things in different settings. So I've been in meetings where I'm like, well, I know you really like these bead necklaces, and over there you love curly ribbons and you love fake hair extensions, and come to the conclusion you love stringy things. And now that opens up a whole group of things that I can now try and bring to you because we now understand what the kind of the salient features are that you're seeking out. So, in Perkins, our deafblind program is having a serious metal moment right now. Everybody's really into the kitchen utensils. Typically developing kids, they go into the kitchen, they open up the cabinets, they take out the pots and pans and smash things together and push their family's buttons. And there's no reason that all of the kids that we work with that are in our families shouldn't have those same opportunities to cause that good trouble and maybe smash around your house a little bit. And then in terms of the positioning, so I touched on this a little bit before, but we just want to make sure it's consistent, it's within their physical access, and don't just think hands, think, lift my head and I touch something, it's at my mouth, my arm, my elbow, my hand, am I hitting it with my body as I'm moving, is it my foot? Kids love touching with their feet and it gives them so much valuable sensory information to do that. So any interaction is the goal, and pay attention to what your kid is just using naturally. And then if your child, if they're a little bit more limited in what their reach and their access is, you want to put it in a spot where they might bump into it, especially if they're in that still learning that the world is out there and they can impact it. Or if you're at the point where they know
what they like and they're going for it right away, and you want to start challenging their balance in some of these positions, then you want to position it in a spot that makes them reach or that they have to move towards it to get it. And then we just want to make sure that we give everyone an exit strategy. We don't want to put things touching their body in a way that they can't choose to get away from, because we want them to have that independence. We don't want them to experience the world as a place where things just happen to you. And also just thinking about, like we have some kids who love vibration, and I know that I can put vibration on a resonance board and that will make them happy, but I would never do that unless I had already made sure, because vibration is really strong sensory input, that that is something that they love and that they're not trying to get away from after 30 seconds. So I'm going to transition right into our next part. So each one of us is going to be talking about a different positioning. So prone-ish, sitting, kneeling-ish, and standing. So as we're going through these, like Emily talked about with splinter skills, your child is not in one category. They're not in one spot on the developmental spectrum. So one or maybe even all of them might apply to your child. And then we're going to have the explorations are again broken up by position, so you can come to one or all of them to check those out. And we're really going to just be highlighting why do we want to do this position, and then giving you 3 options for suggestions on how you could potentially do that positioning. So I'm starting out with prone. So prone is being on your stomach. So kids, we're not talking about kids being on their back because they tend to do that naturally, and so we're moving to the next step from there. So if your child is someone who would benefit from working on this, they might be someone who has trouble holding up their head and neck. They might not be putting much weight through their arms and relying on the positioning supports that they have, like their strollers or wheelchairs or things like that. And they might need to be really well supported in a chair in order to be able to hold their head up and access their environment and have those opportunities. So what we want to do is get that head up. We want to give them more sensory information about their body position. We want to improve their alertness by getting their head up. And if they have vision and hearing access, we want to make sure that we're giving them better opportunities to see and hear their environment. We really want to strengthen the shoulder complex. So the way that our body develops is we get head control first, and then it moves down the body and out the body. So if you want them to be using their legs well, then they need to have well-developed shoulders back here, this includes shoulders, in order to be able to do those fine motor skills out here rather than being unstable, and to progress them throughout their whole body. Our goals in these positions are to get that head up, get that neck extension instead of heads down. We want them to be able to try and hold their body in a middle position rather than being one side or the other. Get that proximal stability at their head and neck, at their shoulders, at their trunk, at their hips, so that they can start moving their arms and legs and doing more complicated movements. So an analogy I love is you can't fire a cannon off a rowboat. If you don't give yourself a stable base first and then you try and do a movement, then your whole body's going to go with it. So for what we think about a lot is stability versus mobility. If you have internal stability, then you can add in degrees of freedom. You can add in movement into the activity. But if a child doesn't yet have that internal stability, then you have to provide that externally and keep things closer and not make those same movement demands of them. And then in this group who are doing a lot of prone positioning, and that's the main focus, they're more likely to have that higher medical complexity. So that might mean that they can't lie flat. So we want to have them up on a wedge or other support. We want to be protecting the airway, and we want to make sure that we're protecting their spine so that we're not just letting their head hang down and putting that strain on their neck if they can't actually lift up in an anti-gravity position. So the first position that I'm going to talk about is just getting your child onto your stomach, whether or not that's flat on a surface or whether that's using a wedge or something else for support. So again, what does your child need to be safe? If they can't lie flat, or if they have sensitivity around their G-tube placement, you can kind of try and find ways to create a hole so that you're not putting pressure in that spot. What does your child need to be interested? So the student who's in the photo is on a large red fair ball. She does not like being on her stomach very much, so I had to make it interesting. I had to include bouncing and movement in order to want her to stay there. And she also doesn't like being in that position for long, so I'm not going to do this big setup and then 30 seconds later have her be like, and I want something different. So on the bowl, I can roll her onto her back, give her a break, bounce her that way, and then after a little bit, roll the ball again and get her back onto her stomach and get that so that she's pushing through her arms and she's getting that opportunity. And that's really the big thing, is we want head up and we want weight bearing through those arms in order to build that stability and strength. So the next photo is in supported quadruped, so supported on your hands and knees. We are giving you the trunk support, but we still really want to get that weight bearing through the arms and legs and try and get the upright head. So if your child can't tolerate hands on the floor yet, they just won't bring them down, they're just hanging. My friend in the picture, when she started, just loved being upside down. It's just too fun with the blood rush and the sensory input and all of it. And so this was, I couldn't even get her hands down onto the mat until around the time of this picture. So then you can bring the hands up onto the support surface. It's still not kneeling. Kneeling is different because in this they're still putting a lot of weight through their trunk and through their arms rather than being shifted back. But like meet them where they're at and meet their needs. And be mindful if someone loves to be upside down, that you might have a really hard time getting their head up with this particular setup. And then once you get to the point where your child is starting to get their head up, their arms are down, their weight is shifted forward, they're not just sitting back on their heels, you want to start rocking. You want to get them rocking and doing that weight shifting because that's what's going to get them to the next step. So for this child, once we got to the point where I could have her hands down and she was really weight bearing, I would use a vibration toy, and so every time she moved forward and weight shifted, she would feel the vibration, could maintain that position, and then she'd giggle and come back and then be like, still there. Started out very close, the tiniest movement, I'd add in the vibration, and then started moving the vibration toy further and further away to get that bigger weight shift. And then, so the last one for the prone positioning suggestions is pivoting. So this is a pre-crawling skill. Not every child crawls. Not every child needs to crawl, and we understand that, and we're totally fine with that. But being in these positions, even if you never get to the point of crawling because you skip it to go for walking or you end up in a different spot developmentally, is that you're just getting all of these opportunities to develop that stability and to have developmental access in different ways. So we just really want to get those arms engaged. We really want to give you that opportunity. So if you are hoping to get the movement piece, get the pivoting in, you want to, and that's hard for your child, then putting them on a low resistance surface. So these are two photos of the same student, 1 year into Perkins and then very recently. So initially it was just getting you on your stomach and putting materials to the side to get them shifting. But this kid was like, hey, I could roll. I could roll back and forth and eventually I'll get to the thing and like do my overhead reach and pull it towards me. So that's when we worked with our assistive device center to develop, we're calling it a pivot plate, where now the child, they've got the supportive cradle, it maintains them in that position. There's arm grips for them to pull themselves around to really work on that dynamic movement. So we just, in this, we want to make sure we're placing materials where you want them to go. If you put it in front of them, they're probably not going anywhere. And be careful because some of our kiddos have fragile morale. So if you move the items too far or too fast, they're going to check out. They're overcoming a lot of coordination and challenge, physical effort to do this. So we want to respect that they're not really of a enjoy the journey sort of situation. They're often I'm in it for the destination and that's it. So you want to decide how much reward they need at the destination in order to keep them engaged in the activity. With this child, if I move the toys too fast, their head is down, they're shaking no, they're pulling out their hearing aids, and like, noted, back it up a little bit. Here's the thing you really wanted. Yeah, we're gonna switch to sitting.
All right, so yes, the next developmental position we're going to talk about is sitting. similar to what Lauren went through, we're going to talk about some benefits of sitting, and then we're going to go into 3 different examples of activities. So one of the biggest benefits of sitting is developing postural stability. Everybody sitting here right now, you probably don't even realize it, but you are using muscles all the way from your head down to your pelvis just to maintain that upright spine in sitting. And that can be really difficult for our kids when they're first getting up off the floor and getting off of their support surfaces and starting to sit upright. So it can be really challenging, and we want to start to get those muscles working. In terms of improving upright tolerance, that refers to all the other systems in the body, everything else that's going on once you get upright, your breathing control, your circulation, blood pressure regulation, all of those things are really impacted once you start being upright, so that is another benefit of being in this position. And then developing balance reactions also happens when we're upright. As soon as we get up off the floor and have the opportunity to fall, have the opportunity to tip and lose our balance, we start to develop those balance reactions, which are so important for everything else moving forward. And all of those postural stability muscles are endurance muscles that have to work over a long period of time to maintain a position. So we're building that muscular endurance at the same time. So really the goals of being upright and sitting, that we want our kids to be engaging in social activities. We want them to be in an upright position where it's easier for them to interact with their environment around them, with their peers, with their family. And it's also a lot easier of a position to be able to use your arms when you are in prone. It can be really difficult to reach out for things, to interact with objects with your hands. Once we get up and sitting and we have that internal stability, it's a lot easier to start using your hands to interact and exploring objects. So our first activity suggestion is ring sitting. For purposes of this presentation, that includes any type of sitting on the floor. It could be with a wide base of support with your legs out in a ring position, sitting crisscross, anything like that. And this is kind of the first type of sitting that we get into because we are close to the floor and you have that wider base of support. So when you have your kids in this position, where you position yourself really depends on how much support your child needs. So you want to give them the least possible amount of support that will still keep them safe, but encourage them to do as much of the work as they possibly can. So for a child who needs a lot of support at the trunk, you might be sitting behind them with your hands on their trunk to help keep them upright. For a child who is able to sit up independently or prop themselves up on their arms, you might be sitting in front of them because you want that social interaction. You want turn taking and interacting with objects with them. So just be mindful of where you're placing yourself and where you're placing materials. We'll go into this a little bit more if you come to the exploration stations, but you can see in some of these pictures that we're using active learning frames to have materials a little bit more upright when we're trying to encourage that trunk and neck extension. We really want the materials to be more up at eye level because materials that are on the floor are just going to encourage kind of that flexed posture. So our second activity, sitting and reaching, you can see in this example, in this picture, that the student is sitting on a bench, so a little bit narrower of a base of support, a little bit more challenging of a position. Her feet are still supported, which we always want the feet flat on the floor to help with balance. And you might need, depending on your child's level of support, you might need back support or you might choose to go without it. When we're sitting and reaching, we want to really start with success. Just like Lauren was talking about, we're not trying to induce frustration. We're not trying to make this an unenjoyable experience. We want it to be fun. So you want to start by placing objects really close so that your children are encouraged to reach out and interact with them. And then as they become a little bit more engaged and they're doing more, we're just going to gradually move those objects farther and farther away, so that your children have to disrupt their center of balance a little bit to reach for it and then bring themselves back. And the motivating materials are going to depend on your child as well and what is motivating for them and what they can access from a sensory perspective. So you might use toys with bright lights, toys with sound, If you have a child who is deafblind, you might be using the tactile sense. You might be taking a material that they like, brushing it up against their arm, things like that, in order to let them know which way to reach and where they're headed for it. And depending on kind of the postural response that you're looking for, you can be really mindful about where you're placing materials. If you have a child whose posture is slouched and you want them to be upright, you're going to be holding things up high. If your child is leaning to one side or the other, you might be placing things in the opposite direction to encourage them to be moving in that direction. And then the last activity we have here, sitting on an unstable surface. This is where we really get to make it fun. We can use any type of material, a ball, a springboard, a scooter, anything that we have that's unstable. And this is kind of the highest level of these three activities of a balance challenge. The more unstable the surface, the more muscles are going to be engaged and the more difficult it's going to be for your child to maintain their balance. So we're really just making it a fun activity in any way that we can. Singing songs, playing games. To even add to the challenge, you can combine this with a different activity like sitting and reaching. They can be sitting on an unstable surface and also reaching, and that's working on so many different things at once. So adding in that unstable surface is a way to not only make it more challenging, but make it more fun and make it more engaging for your child.
All right, so I'm excited. We're going to get a little bit farther from the floor and talk about kneeling. So some of the benefits of kneeling, it's very similar. You'll recognize from what Emily and Lauren were talking about, we're kind of building on that. So we're still building strength and stability, especially now in the lower body and in the hips, where you're putting more weight through your legs and putting your legs through the floor more than your upper body. We are practicing weight shifting now. We can get a little bit more side to side. We're doing that in sitting too, but now there's a little bit more distance. You're adding a little bit of challenge to it, and you're really getting ready to stand, which is why I love kneeling so much. I'm a big kneeling nerd. So our goals while we're working with our kids in kneeling, we want to work on that endurance. We want to keep them there. So we want it to be obviously really fun because we are engaging and that's what we're here for. But to keep them there and to encourage them to be kind of getting up and down from the floor and whatever they're able to do in all of that sense. We're also going to include balance challenges. As Emily was talking about reaching, we're just going to keep doing that basically. Working on getting a narrower base of support. That's another way that will add a little bit of a balance challenge. So maybe they start with their feet really wide and they're leaning on stuff, and as they get better, they can bring their knees together. Maybe they don't lean on anything. We get a little crazy. And we are developing those foundational movement patterns using kneeling to stand. So I know I just said all this stuff about kneeling. Quadruped, though, is a great position to start in. A little bit progressed from what Lauren was talking about on being supported hands and knees. You can even see we've got the same friend demonstrating a progression of what she was demonstrating earlier. So you really want to start with whatever amount of support your child needs. So you're going to start with giving them a lot more support, like Lauren talked about, and then kind of moving to supporting their hips or their trunk. So they're able to kind of grade how much weight is going through their hands and their knees. But you want to really focus in this position where we're lessening the support, that they're positioned well. So you want to keep an eye on their shoulders being over their either elbows, like in the bottom picture, or hands, like in the top. You want to think about keeping that good angle so the shoulder complex is still getting stronger. And that their knees are right under their hips. So again, you're strengthening those hips. And then Emily really hit the nail on the head in her whole explanation of where to place things. It might seem a little bit weird of where you're putting things around on the floor and they're looking down, but we want to keep that in mind again of where will they know that something's there, where will they want to reach for it, what's going to be there that will encourage them to stay in this position and build that strength and build that endurance. And then once they're kind of good with that, we can encourage them to maybe even ditch the hands, go a little crazy. And then we get into tall kneeling. So here you're going to think about setting things up a little bit higher. You obviously still want your kid to know that the stuff is there. So that can get a little tricky sometimes when you're dealing with different types of visual impairments or multisensory impairments. So you know your kid best, you know kind of how to set them up for this if you're jingling a bell in front of them and then placing it on the table so they can hear it's close, but I need to get up there, I need to reach for it. So kind of being a little bit creative with what you're using as those support surfaces. As a support person, while you're in this play, while you're kind of teaching them that they don't have to sit on their feet, they can push up, you can give support, of course, but you want to be careful about where you give it, because if you are holding them and kind of trying to push them up, they're not doing the work, and then also you become a chair. So as Lauren mentioned, we don't want to exhaust ourselves. We want to stay in it. We want to keep playing. So if you hold kind of at the side of their hips and just encourage them to go forwards, they can learn how to activate those muscles and how to use their glutes to squeeze up and to be in that position, and then eventually you can let go. And it's a lot easier of a transition if you're giving that support at the sides. This student's doing great. She has just support at her hands, but when we go out into the halls, we'll talk a little bit more about where you can place benches and furniture and stuff like that to be more of a thing that they're leaning on or more of a thing that they're reaching to, and there's different ways that we can play with all of that. And then my most favorite one, half kneeling. So very similar to tall kneeling. A lot of the times, and if you're working through these transitions, you'll go from tall kneeling to half kneeling. So it's a very similar situation with what you're using for supports and where you want to place things and where you want to be. But you're starting with a support surface somewhere. You just want to make sure you have room for their knee. That's an easy thing to forget. But if you have them at a wall that they're pulling up to, and there's a wall in front of them, they can't get up. So just being mindful of things like that. And again, we'll talk about it a little bit outside, but in this picture, you can see that she has the bench next to her. So she has one arm of support, and then she has plenty of space to move that leg around. And even in this picture, if she wanted to, she could switch her legs, because we do want to encourage playing with both legs up. It will work on balance a little bit differently, and you want to make sure both of those legs are getting equally strengthened.
Do you see that kids sometimes have a preference for a side because one side's stronger? Or
Definitely. Mm-hmm. But if we're going to be making it fun, it's a great opportunity to kind of work that out, because as they get up, as they keep moving around, as they work towards standing and walking, we love balance. And there's some physical, medical reasons, things like that, that will get in the way of it, but as much as we can, we want to keep things balanced.
Can I just say, so to your point, Sharon, about having a one-sided weakness, they're going to want to use their stronger leg to be the back leg, and they're going to want to put their weaker leg in front because most of their weight is going through that back leg. Right. And you might have to start out, they might not be able to maintain the position the other way, but as they get stronger, you want to then start incorporating in that switch.
So then the last thing of what we're thinking about here in the realm of kneeling is reaching, is moving those things a little bit farther away. Getting them to lean forward will be a great precursor to what Alysha's about to lead into. Even reaching sideways and kind of realizing like, oh, that's kind of tough. And thinking about where those things are, how high up they are, but I'll let Alysha get into that.
Yeah, so now we are going into standing on our 2 feet. The fully erect position has many benefits, like all of these guys were talking about with just incorporating those legs too. So with standing, we're bearing weight on our feet, and it helps to develop the strong bones and muscles and joints within the entire legs and pelvis. It also helps to develop balance reactions. Like Emily was talking about, there's balance reactions in sitting, but there's also different balance reactions in standing because we're including 2 more limbs in this position. So it also makes the heart work a little bit harder because now it's the whole body against gravity that blood has to flow up those long legs. So it can help to increase that endurance to tolerating more upright positions. Standing can also improve social interaction. So because somebody's fully upright and they can see more or feel more, or people are more likely to come to them and interact with them or initiate that interaction. So you can see that increased social interaction when a child starts to be standing. And then also it encourages further exploration of different environments, so they can reach more, they can find more, because now they're taller, they have that higher level, and so there's just more to explore within the world. So some goals that we're looking at when we're talking about standing is that we want them to explore new places. So when we're thinking about surfaces, we want to think about what's under their feet as well as what's under their hands or against their body for support. So giving your child different options: grass, carpet, tile, something squishy, something hard under their feet to get that different feeling. So even with shoes on, it's gonna feel different under their feet and when they're bearing weight on it. Also under their hands: bumpy, smooth, hard, soft. Furniture is great versus a countertop. They're going to feel different. So using things that you have in your home or that you can find out in your community to work on this standing piece, but also incorporating those other sensory pieces. Also in standing, we want to challenge balance in all directions. So looking at like what your child's confidence level is here, and just really picking up on those cues. So how many hands are they using? 1 or 2, or maybe they're using their whole body against something, they're leaning a lot. Maybe they're even using their head as an additional support. A lot of our friends like to do that. So that just kind of gives you some more information about where the child is at with regards to their balance and how much you can push them a little bit, versus if you really just need to stay. Are they wobbly? Are they stable? So just playing into what their current confidence level is in standing is important. And lastly, like Lauren was saying, we want to give them an escape plan. And so when you're fully upright, how do you get out of standing? We're not going to go into that big today, but I just want to throw that out there that you need to have an escape plan for your child from standing. They're going to get tired, so they're going to need to sit or get down. And just, we want to be able to do that safely and help guide them, but we also want to let them explore that getting out of standing situation, because research actually shows that that can improve those balance reactions, and that it can be actually necessary for them to develop those balance reactions by learning how to fall safely. So we are helping guide them to that seat or to the floor, but making sure that we are aware that they're going to need to get out of standing. So a transition right from Kat's half kneeling is our pull to stand. So this can be from 2 different positions. One is sitting with feet on the floor, and the other one is the half kneeling from the floor. Or sometimes students might use both feet and extend up to get off of the floor to start with. So here, in all situations, the biggest thing that we're looking for is that forward translation of movement. So we want them to have a surface that they can reach up to. So finding those motivating objects and, oh, it's up there. I have to get up there to get that. Or I need to get forward to get that. So translating that weight from the buttock or from the floor to those feet in order to promote that transition to standing. So here, we are just looking for that forward movement and placing your objects far enough away where they have to actually get their body there. So next we're looking at standing statically. So here's where, if you have a student or a child that needs a standing frame or extra support, this is a great activity for them, as well as those who are new to standing. This is a great starting point. So here what we want the student to do is participate in an activity with the objects very close to their body. We're not working on reaching when we're first standing, we're just working on standing, but you want to make it fun, so you gotta have something there. This is a great opportunity for families to incorporate a child into their cooking routine. Oh, hey, mom's making a cake over here and I'm mixing things. Here's a bowl and a whisk for you too. So just looking at different ways to incorporate your child in the activities that you're doing in the kitchen, in the living room, wherever you are, you can incorporate them here. And then also, it's a great opportunity for children to participate in more independent tasks by having things up versus on a tray or on a table, and trying to get that head up again and pushing through the hands or letting go. So here's where we are looking at that letting go part. So when you start to notice that your child is only using one hand, or sometimes none at all, or they're actually moving their body a little bit to get from one place to another, this is where we want to spread things out. Make these activities or objects slightly out of reach, where they know they're there. We want to make sure, again, that they know that they're there, but that they have to lean to get them a little bit. That's where we start getting that weight shifting like Kat was talking about, but this time on the feet instead of on the knees. So we're adding more distance from the floor, making them work a little bit harder here. This is also a great time to change up your support surface. So your support surface could be in front of you, on the side, in back. Again, just trying to get those different weight shifts in order to try and get those different balance reactions to work. And then this is where you might actually end up seeing some stepping and encouraging that cruising along different furniture or taking steps away from the support surface. And that's really where we're ending our presentation, is with that standing and initiating of steps. But that's really going to be your cue of when your child is feeling much more confident in that fully upright position on their feet.
So on behalf of the deafblind physical therapists, I want to thank you so much for coming today and for spending your time with us, because we know there's a lot of amazing presentation options, so we're just so happy that you're here. So what we'd like to do now is we've created those 4 exploration stations, and we want to give everybody an opportunity. So we have until 11:30. You can stay at one the whole time if that's what's appropriate for the child you're thinking of, or you can visit all 4 if you'd like. We want you to ask us questions. We will each be at the station that we presented on to be able to answer your questions. You absolutely can take pictures of any of the equipment or the materials. There's also handouts that you should be getting through the conference that have a lot of information about the materials and the positioning supports. We wanted to do things that are relatively low cost, that they're easy to find or that they're easy to make, and that give you a lot of options and be kind of a jumping off point. So please ask us, what does this do? Why do you use this thing? Who likes that? You can, like I said, visit all of the stations, or as many or little stations as you want. You can ask us specific questions about, my child really likes this, or they're working on this. Do you have any advice? We're happy to have those conversations. We understand we might have limited context, but we will be happy to answer your specific questions about your child. Please enjoy watching the videos that we've put together at each station of our wonderful deafblind Perkins students in their PT sessions, and thank you so much to the adults of those children who gave us the permission to have that context and to be able to provide those for you today. And please feel free to ask us about a setup in the video and why we set things up in that particular way. To be clear, please do not take any pictures of the videos. We want to respect the privacy of the students, so we want to make sure that they're not in any of the photos that you take. Please do not ask us specific questions about the personal history of the students who are in the photos and videos. So if you have a question about the concept, if you have a question about the application, please come find us, talk to us, and we're really looking forward to, we're very excited about this. We're excited to play. We love playing. We hope you love this. We'll see you out there. Thank you.